Hey everybody, this is Joe Harper with Reformed Truther Ministries, and this is the midweek video. In the midweek video, I take a concept and I talk about it for about 5 to 10 minutes. It's a shorter video than the videos put out on the weekend. That's the concept of the midweek video. So for this week's video, I'm going to take about 10 minutes and I'm going to talk about something that I think is pretty interesting, and especially in light of recent events. This past week, President Trump took office, and people have varying different opinions on Trump and what he may do or not do, whether he's a good figure or a bad figure. There's a lot of controversy around him. But one of the things that he did specifically that I want to talk about today is that he just signed an order to declassify the files on JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King Jr. And so this is pretty interesting. And even though I'm interested on all of them, I'm especially interested on the topic of JFK. And JFK is a topic that I have looked into in the past, and I've always found it to be a very intriguing topic because I do not believe what is called the lone gunman theory. I don't believe in the theory that was put forward by the Warren Commission. And for those of you who don't know the history, the mainstream, I guess what we'd call the official history or the mainstream narrative, whatever term you want to use, is that Lee Harvey Oswald was the shooter, and he used an Italian Carcano rifle shooting from the book repository in Dallas, Texas, and he's said to have fired 3 shots, and that he acted alone, and this is what's called the lone gunman theory. And the final shot is supposed to have hit President Kennedy in the back of the head. But when you get into, there's what's called the magic bullet theory, because the way they explain all of the wounds on JFK's body is that this bullet literally weaved like a magic bullet, hence the name, the magic bullet theory. And by definition, legally, if you were able to prove that there was a 4th shot beyond the 3 that were fired from that, or said to be fired from that rifle, you, by definition, would have a conspiracy because you'd have 2 shooters. So therefore, um, in order to hold up the view that there was no conspiracy, because this has been the big controversy, there has to be the theory of only 3 shooters. And I think the JFK issue it's something that's always been really interesting to me for a lot of reasons, but one of the things about it is probably one of the most famous so-called conspiracy theories. When you think of conspiracy theories, you think of things like, I suppose, the Illuminati, you think it's the moon landing fake, Bigfoot. And I would say JFK is probably arguably the most famous conspiracy theory of them all. And it's a topic where I've seen it throughout my life, where it's a topic where if you bring it up in conversation at social events or like parties, or if you ask questions about it in circles where if you don't know beforehand that it's something that people are comfortable talking about, people can get very angry and very upset. And obviously, there are people my age that feel that way, but I've also noticed that's very prominent in the baby boomer generation. Like even my parents' generation, or even my parents, they would not be very comfortable with this idea of questioning the narrative of JFK. And that's fine. Everybody's at where they're at, and I don't have a problem if people see it differently than I do. But I just think that it's such an important topic in our history, where whatever you think of JFK, he was a very important president in our history. And really, the truth of what happened with his assassination, I think, is a big deal. And personally, I think that it was an assassination by the CIA. And it's fascinating. I was listening to Joe Rogan interviewed President Trump, and I decided to listen to it after the election, because I'll just give you guys a hint. I'm not, even though I'm very conservative, I'm not fully on the Trump train at this point. Viewing things through a truther lens, I have some questions. I think there's some things he may do that may be good, but I'm not fully I'm not just a blind Trumper. You may agree or disagree with me, but I did listen to his interview with Rogan, kind of after things had settled down, and I decided I wanted to hear and go through it, what he said. And I did the same thing with Rogan's JD Vance interview, because Rogan, whatever you think of him, he does interview some very interesting guys. But he was talking about JFK with President Trump. He also asked him about aliens, which was pretty interesting. But you know, Trump said that when he was in there the first time, he was considering pretty closely declassifying these files that he just declassified. And he said that Mike Pompeo, who was at one point the head of the CIA, literally came to him and pleaded with him or pressured him or convinced him to not release the files. And now he said that now they are going to be released. And I was researching this recently just in preparation for this video, and there's going to be a process for these files to come out. And even I am not completely sure will I'm hoping that these files are going to be helpful for the truth to come out more. And I'm hoping that they're going to lead to a lot of clarity. And I also listened to Rogan's interview with RFK, who bears the name of the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, who ran for the Democratic nomination. He wanted to get us out of the Vietnam War, and he was assassinated too. And RFK really was pushing for, he was really happy that this truth was going to come out. And obviously he's had a lot of controversy over his views of vaccines and whatever else. And I think that it's really interesting the times in history where we're living in, and I think it's interesting that a lot of these things are coming to light. So I don't know if these files, are they going to all be blacked out and redacted, or are they going to provide, how much true information they're going to provide? I don't really know, but I'm hopeful at the very least that they're going to be a step in the right direction. So when I heard this story, I was really intrigued. And you say, well, Joe, why do you? Well, before I get to that, I want to say, but yeah, this JFK thing, it's an important topic in my opinion. I think it says a lot about a lot of things going on in our country. Because if you do believe that there were forces within our government that assassinated our duly elected president because he wasn't going with along, that's a big deal. And that's something we should care about as Americans. If we love our country, if we want what's best for your country, if we want integrity and principles in our politics. And I don't think JFK was perfect or a saint. I think he was a complicated man, as most politicians are. But yeah, I think as you read the history, I think he was standing up to elements in our government that wanted us to get in wars like Vietnam. And I don't think that's really that controversial. But it's, if you question anything that happened, it's a conspiracy theory. And it's funny. It's funny when you look at the word conspiracy, where that first came from. It came from the Central Intelligence Agency. It was a propaganda word used to shut down people that's asking questions. And I've always wondered that, why is it that we can't ask questions? Why is it that this is off limits? I understand why it's not socially acceptable. People are afraid of it, or they're just not comfortable with it. I get the reasons, but I just don't understand why this should be something that's out of bounds. I just don't think it should be that way. And I know that it challenges people. It really does. But I really think this is something we should be able to be talking about. But just to end this video, I want to talk about some resources on this. I mean, this is probably a very famous movie that was put out on JFK by Oliver Stone. And even some people in my family, they don't like this movie very much, but that's okay. But I think Oliver Stone, much more liberal than me. It's funny, he fought in Vietnam. And I think a lot of where his views of history come from, and he's really much more of a progressive, left-leaning, not a conservative. But I'll tell you, the two things when I hear him talk that I really agree with are his views on JFK and a lot of what he says about the war in Vietnam. And he lived through it, and I think that gives him some credibility. But yeah, even his movie on Nixon, pretty good. A lot of good stuff in that movie that he really covered. He's done a lot of. He's a really knowledgeable historian. I don't agree with all his takes on everything, but he's done a lot of research in this area. And this is a pretty famous movie. It's about this guy named Jim Garrison, and Jim Garrison was the district attorney in New Orleans, and before he took on this case, he was able to get a lot of corrupt judges disbarred. And he took on a bunch of corrupt judges in New Orleans and was a pretty principled guy. And he ended up investigating the Kennedy assassination. And he realized that this guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, which he came to believe was a patsy, he had this group of conspirators. And he found out about these guys, like Guy Bannister, who was connected to the FBI and ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, and he learns about this guy named David Ferrie, who was connected to the CIA, and then he finds out about this guy named Clay Bertram, where his real name is Clay Shaw, and he ends up bringing this guy Clay Shaw to trial. And all of these guys, like Oswald and David Ferry and Clay Shaw. These guys were all connected to the CIA, and they were connected with things like the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuba stuff. And then this same program's connected to JFK, and even this stuff even gets talked about kind of in passing in the Nixon tapes, which are available to listen to. So that's really, really interesting. But if you're not, but really, this is the book behind the movie. I just want to finish off by uh, recommending this resource. I'm running over 10 minutes, but this is the actual book put out by the real Jim Garrison. It's one of the best books on the topic that I'm aware of. And I'm not an expert, but I've read a few books. I read Jim Mars's book on the Kennedy assassination. I have a copy of the I think it's the full Warren Commission report is pretty massive, but I have a summary edition of it, and I've read through a good amount of it. So I would say I'm relatively knowledgeable. I wouldn't claim to be a full-on expert, but I've read some of the material, and I really was intrigued by Garrison's book on the Trail of the Assassins, and he lays out exactly what I just said. I just want to read this top little quote by this guy named Norman Mailer on the top of this book cover. I don't know who that guy is, but this is a really good summary of the book. He says, Garrison book presents the most detailed case yet made that President Kennedy's assassination was the product of a conspiracy and that the plotters and key operators came not from the mob but from the CIA. And I think when you really get into the weeds of all these guys who are associated with Oswald, and you get into this network, this world they were living in, it does take you back to the intelligence community. And this has been a pretty common view, but it's something that obviously is very suppressed, and that's kind of how I view it. And I just think it's an important topic, and I thought in light of Trump releasing these files, it was a really good time to just give my little 10-minute take on Kennedy and the assassination. And that's kind of what I got, guys. So I'm running over. I'm already at 12 minutes, but hey, let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about President Kennedy, assassination, Trump releasing these files. Feel free to let me know what you think. Let me know below. Let me know. So this is Joe Harper with Reformed Truth and Ministry. Thanks, everybody. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it, then help support the work of Reformed Truther Ministries. Contact info and donations is available at www.reformedtruther.com.